Coming up on Why Should I Trust You? It's time to rip the Band-Aid off and be brutally honest. When it comes to health communication, the old way is dead. Muerto. Done. Maha and others have adapted, communicating with each other and the wider public in ways we've never seen before. And again, just being super honest here, veteran public health and scientific institutions right now are getting smoked. The reality is hard to face. The old model, do the study, publish it, let the legacy media take it from there, or point people to a CDC website, or maybe do a live hit or two on cable news, that's over. Millions no longer trust the science, the message, or the messenger, which leaves those doing the studies, or those trying to improve the public's health, or those who say they're combating misinformation, with a stark choice: adapt or become irrelevant. Remember, public health is nothing without buy-in from the public. To help us grapple with this extraordinary upheaval, we're joined by two public health and science communication innovators, Katelyn Jetelina and Jessica Steier. They're emblematic of a small but mighty slice of public health that is working round the clock, trying to find new ways to break through with evidence-based information that connects to people's lives. And it's not easy. Today, we'll ask Jessica and Katelyn how they're adapting, and ask, are they getting the support they need from the scientific establishment that desperately needs people like them? Let's get started. Hey, welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, welcome, everybody.
Okay, so guys, I love this subject so much today. I'm really psyched about it. I should tell our listeners we are recording this on Monday, October 6th. So if anything else happens this week, I don't know, because things tend to happen a lot in America these days. And let's say we miss it. You can blame it on Dr. Mark.
Yep.
Exactly. Look, we have learned so much this year about the ways in which people receive information, what breaks through, how it breaks through, and it's been really eye-opening, jaw-dropping, kind of mind-blowing. You get the idea. The media landscape is changing and changing and changing. And honestly, it's why we exist. A few of us here once worked in legacy media for a long time. One of us still does. But we understand this change because we are experiencing it ourselves. And we want to be really honest today. Veteran public health is really struggling to break through and connect in this new environment. We hear it from them. And we're joined today by two innovative forces from the veteran public health camp to get their perspective on the struggle to communicate about public health, science, and medicine. But first, who are we? I'm Brenda Adhikari.
Yeah, and I'm Tom Johnson.
And I'm Maggie Bartlett.
And I'm Dr. Mark.
Yeah, so Maggie's a virologist at Hopkins. Mark's a physician and medical reporter. And Brenda and I are veterans of legacy media, as Brenda just told you. And we made the leap here. So where are we, Brenda? Is this new media?
I think this is new media. Were we old media? Yeah, I guess we were old. Like,
we're old and we're new.
Something old, something. I feel old, but I guess I'm doing new shit now.
And Mark, you're straddling both worlds?
I mean, I am. I straddle, I feel like all kinds of worlds. I see patients 5 days a week. We have this podcast. I also work in network news at ABC News. And, you know, that's where Tom and I met. That's where Brenda and I met. Tom was my first boss at ABC. And, you know, I used to have to send him ideas. And I remember one time I sent him a whole email and I would be like, just say yes or no, good idea, bad idea. And I was like waiting for him to reply.
He's still waiting.
You know, it's still waiting.
Right.
And, you know, it's at ABC, obviously it's very different, right? You know, I do investigative reporting. You know, look, I'm not there every day. I'm a contributor there and I'm an investigative reporter there. And it's a whole different kind of enterprise. You know, it's layered, it's rigorous, it's producers, it's writers, editors, fact checkers. I mean, you got standards. We have all those meetings, you know, everything, like a whole team of people working to deliver a story. And that's, you know, that's a rigorous process that's, you know, I think not often visible to the audience. And, you know, as I was thinking about getting some guests for this show, one of the, you know, a political operative told me, look, give anyone a mic or a smartphone and suddenly they have a podcast. Look, you could just throw them up there and there you go. But that's not how network news works. You know, it still is a powerful medium. I mean, it reaches millions of people. I mean, if you just look at the nightly news, the evening news, they have a combined viewership of nearly 20 million people a night. That's not nothing. But what I love about what we're able to do here on this podcast is we get to slow down. We get to wrestle with trust, these like emotions and this opportunity to have deeper conversations. And I think what we're trying to do here is to cut through the noise. I mean, the goals are similar. We want to make a connection with the audience. We want to help the audience. And ultimately, if they feel that, whether it's on network news or here, you know, that kind of helps build trust. But it's a different ballgame, no doubt about it.
Well put.
So we're going to bring on Katelyn and Jessica in a moment. But Tom, let's talk about some of this new communication landscape and how we got here.
Yeah, and it's super relevant to what Mark's describing. Sort of media, whatever media means to you. I guess we're talking about mass media, legacy media. Its decline in trust, in some ways, it's been attached to science communication. It's been attached to public health, and the two have sunk a bit. But I want to go back all the way to 1926, and that's the year a book came out called Microbe Hunters. And this was like a collection of hero stories, and it was a real active time in science. So we're talking the early 20th century. And this book really romanticized these real life scientists. So, like Antony van Leeuwenhoek, who was the first to see bacteria with homemade microscopes, Louis Pasteur, the first to prove germs were causing disease and develop pasteurization and vaccines. He's captured. No, just kidding. But the book was a monster bestseller and a classic. And so why the hell are we talking about this old book? Well, the book in some ways helped popularize scientists as heroes and helped place a halo over them. And that sort of captured the popular imagination in America. And it lasted. So, the book writing about Pasteur said, his imagination carried him into the clouds, digging for good, true, hard facts. So literally 100 years later, imagine what's being written about the folks that came up with mRNA.
Not that.
Not that. And what's also interesting, and we'll get into this sort of more in our conversation, is Microbe Hunters is really about, celebrating this early 20th century, as we said, a time period before vaccines, a time where we were identifying infectious disease and identifying microbes. And it's actually a time period that RFK Jr. is hearkening back in things like the new video he put out about vaccines and how public health is only telling you only telling you the story of vaccines. They're not telling you about the ways in which discoveries and sanitation actually are the true heroes of defeating infectious disease. But we'll get to that in a moment. So anyway, this halo stuck for decades, and it really wasn't a lot of work for science. They would dedicate their energies into the lab. They would publish in a major journal, and mass media essentially did the work of informing the public. And the public really had no avenue to question it. But slowly but surely, the public began to question. And, developments like antibiotics or a polio vaccine were soon in the rearview mirror. And now we're talking about pesticides or rising healthcare costs or opioids. And then finally, of course, the pandemic. And if you mix in the internet, if you mix in social media algorithms, if you mix in politicization of health and science, bad actors, and that kind of old system that had a monopoly on science communication starts to crash. So, for a big chunk of the American public, suddenly when mass media comes out and spreads the gospel of a new published study, they're just not buying it anymore. And this top-down approach of directing the public to, say, like a website of an institution like the CDC or a medical association, it suddenly is not working well in a time when people are being told to question the institution and question the medical association. So ultimately, that halo from about the 20s on is now off. And public health and science and the medical community really were caught flat-footed, unsure of how to communicate. Certainly public health was caught flat-footed on how to communicate to millions of people who were suddenly using new adjectives to describe them, like sinister, profit-driven, captured, heavy-handed, overprescribing, corrupt, untrustworthy. There was an opinion piece in the New England Journal of Medicine that ran this summer. It was written by Katelyn Jetelina, one of our guests today, as well as Megan Rainey, Kristen Panthagani, Edward Melnick, all of Yale Public Health. And the opening graph, I believe, said health communication in the U.S. is in a precarious situation. Over the past 2 decades, the public's preferred and trusted sources of health information have shifted dramatically, but institutions have failed to keep pace with these changes.
Yeah, I mean, when you read that New England Journal of Medicine article, it really makes you think about our role. And trust has certainly collapsed for sure. But, I still find it really hard to believe and accept that this narrative that public health was caught, flat-footed. We found ourselves transitioning from looking at populations and, how do we do all these decisions that help, large groups of people, to moving towards a society that's really valuing individual choice, informed consent, and that sets up a huge, disparity on the missions, right? But I think it's just crazy to say that these public health professionals are, suddenly ineffective communicators after we've done all these things for all these years, and we have cancer screenings and we do all this stuff. Teach people how to boil water if there's an issue, or identify outbreaks, or all of these things that we do, and suddenly they can't do it anymore. I even wonder. I was speaking with a friend of the pod, Dr. Spencer, and we even thought about, like, even if we had different public health messaging, like completely different, like, would the pandemic, or could the pandemic have been any different? And I still think that it's difficult to, like, enter this narrative where we're going to make a new echo chamber of just public health is a bad communicator. But we're going to get into all that with our guest today.
We are, and I do understand that. And even when doing this, when we were kind of thinking about this episode, we were like, are we just like pushing a narrative that like public health is failing or something? But I think the one thing that I'm hearing, and I've heard it, speaking privately with our guests as well, that like, I don't know if it's so much failing, at least as I look at it, as I do that they're being kind of outgunned. You know what I mean? That like they're outmatched in the current media environment, and that other people are getting through to the public better. Yeah. And that's really different from saying that like they're not good doctors, or they're not good at like doing their actual jobs. I do think ultimately it's like a tree falls in a forest situation. You could be doing the most incredible work out there, but if it's not actually getting through, and maybe even the message isn't always a great message, because I don't buy that it's always a messaging problem. Sometimes I think it's a problem.
Yeah, it's like a new ecosystem that they have to like compete
That's right.
in.
And that's,
really,
I think, what we're going to cover next, which is the deck is stacked against them. Right? Yeah. It's not the old ecosystem.
And the fact is that public health has lost trust. Science has lost trust. And we talked a little bit about media. They've lost trust too. And there's a new survey out that basically talks about this. So we're talking about legacy media, mass media, newspapers, television, radio, the ways that you can imagine, your parents depended on for news and information. And the headline here is, look, it's not great. Just 28% of Americans have a great deal or even fair amount of trust in mass media. So that's a new, unfortunate all-time low.
And we're talking about places like your like legacy brands, your New York Times, your CBS, your CNN, those kinds of places.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also, partisan split. So among Republicans, just like with everything now, we have to look at it through like a political partisan lens, unfortunately. Among Republicans between the ages of 30 and 49, only 6% say they trust mass media, either a great deal or even just a fair amount. So let me repeat that. Only 6% of Republicans between ages 30 and 50 trust that legacy media. So, like we said, millions still watch the evening news, but usually people pick the channels that tell them what they want to hear. And that makes it harder for evidence and new science or public health messaging that makes us a little uncomfortable to win out over reassurance.
I mean, listen, I'll just say right here, I am no longer really trusting legacy media. I was a creature of legacy media. That's where I came up. And
what don't you trust? What don't you trust? Like, do you feel like the fact that they're giving you is incorrect? Like if they say 40% of people don't like coffee, like, do you not trust that? Or like, is it some other thing that you don't trust?
I think it's a more holistic mistrust, because I know that, having worked there, you are often driven by the things that your audience wants to see. It's like they are their own algorithm. This idea that like everything else is an algorithm and legacy media is only like fueled by this sort of like desire to inform, I just don't think is accurate. They're also fueled by what people are liking. Like I remember us poring over the minute by minutes and being like, oh, these kinds of stories rate well, so let's do more of these kinds of stories. And knowing that that is how we're producing stuff just makes me mistrust the intention sometimes of stuff behind it. Now, I'm really glad I worked there, so I know people like Dr. Mark, and I know some other people who I know how like they're really good journalists. And so I think on an individual basis, I trust individual people. But as a whole, I'm not even watching these places anymore. I really don't. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MS. I don't watch any of these places. I read the New York Times occasionally. Like that's probably the one place. But other than that, everything I do is through new media now. Okay, wait, that was just a little sidetrack.
No, I think that's a delicious side dish, Brenda. I think it reminds me of the numbers about, we've seen these changes to trust in new media, and it makes me think about how Americans have viewed scientists 76% of Americans still have confidence in scientists to act in public health or in the public's best interest, which is great. 89% see scientists as being intelligent. But if we dig deeper into those, there's some ominous signs that I'm concerned about. Only 65% of Americans view research scientists as honest. That's not great. 47% think scientists feel superior to others, which affects our ability to communicate. And never mind that only 45% think that scientists are good communicators. And about half the country does not want scientists to weigh in debates about public policy at all. Tom, where does that leave us?
Yeah, so it leaves us like Brenda, kind of living more and more in this kind of new media space and I guess trusting that space more and more. And we spoke about Marshall McLuhan, who famously said the medium is the message, by which he meant, the way we get our information will end up mattering more than the information itself. And we're actually seeing that right now play out really clearly with trust, that people trust the information based on who's telling it to them and not like a rigorous investigation of the information itself. And so let's talk about who's telling them the information. According to Pew, 1 in 5 adults say they regularly get news from news influencers on social media. And when you look, obviously, with younger generations, that number climbs up to 37% are getting their news from influencers. Then there's TikTok. Pew came out with a survey just a few weeks ago that finds that among 30 to 49-year-olds, a quarter of them now say they regularly get their news from TikTok. And that's up from just 2% 5 years ago. And again, when you look under the age of 30, 43% regularly get their news from TikTok, up from just 9% in 2020. And what about all those platforms like YouTube and Rumble and Twitch and Kick and Spotify? Media Matters, which is a liberal watchdog group, looked at how big those audiences are and how those shows skew politically. And they found that right-leaning shows on those platforms now have 480 million followers, while left-leaning shows on those platforms are pulling in about 100 million followers. So
that
right-leaning
statistic
shows,
is staggering.
Yeah, those right-leaning shows on those platforms are reaching nearly 5 times more people than the left-leaning shows. So remember Mark's Gallup finding that only 6% of young Republicans trust legacy media, and it all starts to make sense.
Yeah. All right. So
all right, guys, I think I'm
on that
done.
happy note,
I'm leaving.
Yeah.
No, this is going to be a really good conversation. So when we come back, we have 2 communicators who, like us, are operating within this rapidly changing communication landscape. We will speak with Katelyn Jetelina and Jessica Steier in just a moment. Welcome back, and a big Why Should I Trust You welcome to Katelyn Jetelina and Jessica Steier.
Hello. Woo woo. So excited to be here.
Okay, so listeners of our show know Katelyn Jetelina. She's been on a bunch of times, but in case you're new to the party, Katelyn is an epidemiologist, data scientist. She's worked at CDC in the past. And you probably know her best because she's the author of a wildly popular Substack newsletter called Your Local Epidemiologist, which she launched in the early days of the pandemic. Since YLE, as everyone calls it, has grown and grown. And part of the mission, which is especially relevant to today's episode, is what you write about giving context to breaking public health news and taking on the latest health rumors and making sense of them. Hi, Katelyn.
Hello. Thanks for having me, guys. Always excited to be here.
Yeah, and we're also joined, as we said, by Jessica Steier. And Jessica has a doctorate in public health, and she focuses on science communication. She is the founder of Unbiased Science, which is a social media platform, has a great podcast in which she breaks down, super complex science stuff into language that even we can understand, although I'm sure Maggie and Mark understand it in the super complex form. And she writes essays. Some of them are very provocative in publications like the New York Times, where you've probably read her stuff.
She just had this massive piece of looking into autism studies, and that made a lot of noise out there. So it's really good to have you here, Jess.
Yeah. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you.
So, guys, we're cruising into October. September was, lots of earth-shattering news in this health trust space. We thought we would kind of walk you through a couple big events, just take stock of them and think about them in terms of how they were communicated. What was the communication around these events? Because for some of them, we sort of thought it's hard to imagine that Maha would really be able to stay on message around some of these events, but they did. At least that was our take. And we're curious what your take is. So the first one we'll point you back to was when, it's hard to even remember this now, so much has happened, but when Kennedy was called in front of the Senate Health Committee, and he had just fired his brand new handpicked CDC director, Susan Menares, after just 28 days on the job. He had endorsed her, spoken public about her, and then she was fired. And we build up to this big hearing where Kennedy is going to be questioned about this. And for us, we thought this is just going to be a hit because, like, Maha can't, like, they can't stay on message with this, right? Because this is, how do you explain this? So I guess starting with you, Katelyn, how did you see the messaging come out from that hearing? Like, when you step back and look back at that hearing, what did you see Maha talking about? What did you see public health talking about? And was there any change in anyone's thinking?
No, I mean, I think that's part of the problem. And that's why you guys have this podcast, is that like the messages and the reactions and the dialogue are just so echo chambery that like people are screaming at each other and there's no like listening or deep thinking or critical thinking really on either sides. And that's what's been, I think, the most frustrating theme that I've seen come out the past month. You know, that firing was an implosion on CDC. I mean, it just imploded, and that followed the week after of the mass shooting that happened at CDC. And so like it was so personal, you know, from the public health side, there's just no acknowledgement of that either. And then what happened thereafter was the ACIP meeting. So it's just like one thing after another. And because I think it's coming so quickly like a fire hose, it's really hard to also have deep conversations. I mean, because of this podcast, you know, I have some Maha friends that I text now, and just to like try to debrief, but then it's the next day, it's the next thing, and it's I don't know, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jess has any reaction.
Yeah, Jess, how did you see that hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the same. I think that the Maha message did align very much so with that hearing and with a lot of other events that have transpired since then, which is this idea that, you know, RFK is coming in and we're draining the swamp, right? Like this alignment, they're so effective at like lumping together scientists and physicians and the medical establishment with industry and profit and big pharma. Like we're all just sort of lumped together. And so I think it was very on theme.
Yeah, he was able to fire back at Democratic senators saying, you're part of the problem. You've been in that chair. You've had this job for decades, and we've gotten sicker. And that was, you know, clearly when you looked at what resonated with Maha, they were sharing those moments, not explanations about why the CDC director was fired.
Just to take it just a little further into Tom's September chronology here, but you know, what I'm hearing both of you say is this larger theme at play here of there being alignment around one message, while the other message is either trying to sort of scramble to respond to that. But do you see a similar support and alignment on that public health side? So let's just take, you know, the case of the Tylenol and the autism press conference, right? You've got what was on the face of it was going to be the president making this announcement with Kennedy and all the other health people by his side about what they think is this cause. And then it became obviously a press conference about like everything in health. But I guess, you know, Jess, let's start with you and then go to Katelyn. Like, if you even take, like, I'm not here to litigate what we thought about what Trump said here. Like, you guys have written extensively about it. I know where you're coming from. But when you just look at that phrase alignment of organization on one side, and what did you see on the other? Like, talk to me about what was going through your mind there.
I think you originally phrased it, you know, was the support within the scientific community, like, did that align? Like, was it similar to the quote unquote other side? And my answer to that is hell no. I think that sort of it's the nature of science. We're very critical of each other, very vocally critical. And I would say, I mean, Katelyn and I, we're on several group threads, with other science communicators, and there was a lot of disagreement about how to approach this and how to message it. And I think we're losing the battle because the other side, they give such clear, definitive messaging, right? I mean, regardless of whether we think it's right or wrong, it's very simple, it's very clear, it's very actionable. And then you have the scientific community, and we're quibbling over phrasing because we know that words matter very much, right? And we're very much obsessed with evidence. And so within our chats, Katelyn, maybe we could talk a little bit about this, but, some people are like, nope, we have to come down strong. Tylenol does not cause autism, right? And then there are those of us who are like, well, we can't really say that. We can say there's no causal data or there's no evidence of, right? And so there's a real division even within the scientific community. And I don't know, it just feels, and I'm happy to really, I think we should talk more about this, but it doesn't feel like that same overall support. Like the scientific community, there's a lot of division in how we approach things. We're not always on the same page. And I don't know, I don't have an inside scoop into the MAHA side, but it just feels a lot more generally supportive than the science side. I don't know, Katelyn, what you think?
Yeah, I mean, first off, there's this thing called Brandolini's law. Fuck, I can't even say it. But the idea is that like a falsehood or a lie can go around the world before the truth gets its pants on. And so, yeah, we aren't really trained in media. We don't have a lot of communication skills, but also it's a whole lot easier to sow doubt than to sow confidence. That takes a lot of time. And so I think that I at least feel we're already behind the ball before the press conference even goes forward. The Tylenol reaction was really fascinating to me. And Brenda, I've talked to you a little about this, but I'm starting to see the same sort of mistakes that were being made during COVID, and that really concerns me on the public health side. And I was one of the ones that kind of dropped a bomb in our chats among scientific communicators because I didn't agree on how that message was coming out. I think one lesson I learned when I go back and mistakes I made during the pandemic was reacting a lot to the noise, right? So, for example, I initially dismissed the lab spillover theory because of the messenger, because it was wrapped up in other conspiracy theories, not because of the science, and approaching it with a very steady head. And so I think that the same thing is happening, or did happen with Tylenol. It was because of the messenger, because of that shit show press conference, and just reacting to that rather than like walking through and empowering and trying to be a voice for the parent that was watching that and so incredibly confused and needing a navigator and a narrator rather than just this battle between who's right and who's wrong.
I think that's so fascinating, Katelyn, because I was on a couple of MAHA chats during that conference, and I was just kind of like texting to see how it was going over. And very few people were texting back to be like, Trump is doing great. And like everything he's saying is awesome. Like most people were like, okay, he's a buffoon and he is like, God knows what he's saying is true or not. But the one thing that really was felt like that was pretty uniform in all of the chats was like, man, they are really elevating this cause. And I love that. I love that they're elevating the cause of autism. It's in the Oval Office. It's like, there's parents there. They're like, who has done this ever? Like, this is finally getting the attention it deserves. And that was the message that was really felt. Like, it was almost this like accepted thing that like Trump is going to Trump. But the message was clear that this is an administration that's going to fight for them.
Yeah, but that's also a lot of theater. And that's the problem because nobody knows the cause. And I know we said we're not going to really get into like the specifics, but you can't have a press conference about the cause of Tylenol, have a paper that says there's nothing in this giant paper that says there is a causal link, and then you have health officials on the stage saying the exact opposite. And then to have these public health officials like our guests, like Katelyn and Jess, like, of course you have to react emotionally to that. Of course you can't, just say, oh, well, let's just think about how the moms feel. Like, there's a huge scientific error. Like, that has to be addressed.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Katelyn?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, and there's this, I guess I agree with you, Mark, that of course there's science and a lot of it was wrong and it was just wild. I think the part that I get frustrated about is the lack of recognition that there's massive ripple effects that happen with this. The aftermath of that press conference, I mean, I'm a mom. I have a 5 and 6-year-old, right? Like, and the aftermath, my DMs and my texts from my girlfriends just lit up with worry, right? Even the faint suggestion of blame really haunts pregnant women and parents. And it really piles on this weight of the shoulders that we're already carrying too much as parents already in the United States. And so, like, I agree. Like, I love that autism is really a priority of this administration. I think it's great. We're putting more research and resources to it. But also, it comes with a great responsibility when communicating. And I think also, I would have loved to see the autism foundations there too, and really having this administration take their lead on what is needed and what those parents really want in this moment, which seems to be very much ignored.
Yeah.
Can I say something? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you jump in.
Yeah, Jess,
Well,
please.
And I don't know if I'm taking us off track here, but I'm putting on my science communicator hat and I'm thinking about how I was responding to that press conference and language around this. And Katelyn, I don't know if you had similar feedback, but it was like there was so much pressure then to respond and to communicate in a way where I felt like I was being pulled in a million different directions. And no matter what I said, it was pissing someone off. Like I think I used the phrase increase the risk of autism. And just using that word risk, I received like 1,000 messages from people saying, well, are you implying that autism is a bad thing, right? Like, why you're saying risk of as if it's a negative. So then I was changing it to likelihood. And I'm like, how do I recognize and support this community, but not stigmatize it? Like, I don't know if what I'm saying is clear, but there's a lot of pressure then as science communicators, not only to really dig into the quality of evidence and all that, but like the language that we use is really under a microscope.
Yeah.
It's like a different bar. Like, you have one standard, and then there's another standard for if you just want to riff on autism.
The other thing I noticed that was happening after that press conference, there was sort of a beat where I think Maha was sort of absorbing it. And then suddenly what I was seeing they were talking about was public health is defending using Tylenol during pregnancy. We are now unearthing all these studies and examples of when the company, Johnson & Johnson, who used to own Tylenol way back when, even put out a tweet saying, don't take Tylenol during pregnancy. Look how Trump and RFK Jr. were right and public health was wrong. They're wrong to defend this. And in the meantime, public health is, as far as I could tell, was saying something completely different, which was, we recognize there's research that's finding some linkage here. It needs to be investigated a lot more. It's not causal. And nobody is for willy-nilly taking Tylenol during pregnancy. Take it at the most minimum amounts, take it as little as possible, and only take it because letting a fever go unchecked is bad. And
Right.
There is a downside for not perhaps taking it in certain circumstances. So in other words, in this kind of Maha conversation, what public health was saying was being changed. Your side was, they were kind of creating your opinion and your take, and it wasn't your take. And then they were debunking that thing that they created. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. You just said something, though, that I think we should talk about, which is we acknowledge that, yes, there were some observational studies that found some association, right? And notice how I'm choosing my language very carefully, that warrants further study, right, Tom? Like we're saying it warrants further research. That there that I'm getting a million messages about, okay, so you're saying we haven't looked into this. We don't have the data. We're not saying that it's safe. It's that we just don't know yet. And it's like opened up this can of worms, and there's nuance there. It's like, well, no, we have studied this, and we have some really good studies that have looked into it. And it's just that as a good scientist, you really can't say with 100% certainty, right, that there isn't some subset out there with the right mix of genetics and factors that maybe it does increase the likelihood, right? But it opens up Pandora's box, and I think some people really don't like that uncertainty.
Yeah, Jess, what you're talking about really is when science meets social media, and when science meets the algorithm, and when science meets an era where, uncertainty does not do well online. And why the hell did Tylenol put that tweet out? Like, honestly, when I saw that tweet, I was like, well, I'm not going to fucking take Tylenol if Tylenol itself is going to put that tweet out, right? And then when people are using that as a way of saying, look, see, it then becomes this like information battle, right? It then becomes like this UFC fight, less about parents or patients or moms or kids, and it becomes about who's going to win the information battle, which it takes us to kind of the next place in this. Our thesis is that public health and science is outgunned, outmatched at this moment. By that, I'm saying that from the perspective of somebody, our show speaks a lot with MAHA folks. And I'm not just saying that for like a group of people churning out an information thing and you guys aren't, because I don't know that pound for pound, there's content everywhere people are. I just mean sometimes it appears as though that side's message is coming across and landing in a way that the public health side is not. And my question to you is, help me understand that. Do you agree? And what do you think the cause is? Katelyn, let's start with you.
Brenda, you already know my answer. Yes, I agree. I've been shouting this from the rooftop for the past 6 years. I think that, gosh, how much time do you have on the why? I think that, I can go through it. It's one, we've never been trained in communication. I never got 1 hour of one course in communication or storytelling. Two, I think that MAHA is rightfully so touching on a nerve of a lot of grievances that our systems have failed us in the past. I think 2 or 3, I don't know what number I'm on, is funding. There is zero funding in this space and very little support. I think that 4, there's a cultural difference. There's still this very huge divide, and I would say mass majority of this ivory tower approach that all you need to do is for Stanford to say this and everyone will follow and all that information will trickle down without recognition of the new information landscape, as well as not recognizing that there's been this curiosity, driven class that's been unleashed that you say, Brenda, very well. So, I think, and I can keep going on, but
well, talk to us a little bit about like your experience with, or just in general, working within the framework of when science speaks, it's typically been through these journals, right? And so talk to us about that and whether that culture is changing or you think it's woefully slow at it.
There's a reason why this creator-led model beyond public health, like if we even start talking about mass media, Barry Weiss's Cell Today, right? We're just seeing that humans trust humans, right? Like that's not some sort of like craziness, but I think that when, science with a capital S is in published journal articles or is coming from the ivory tower, it's not understandable. It's very delayed. It's not responsive to the questions and confusion and concerns on the ground. It's this brick wall that's this robotic, sterile thing I cannot stand CDC communications because of this. And it's not real. There's not a human behind it. And there's not a story behind it. I think that's what MAHA does really, really well is they really talk about human suffering and fear. And they lead with that, not with data and facts. People don't need more data and facts. They need narrators and storytellers and navigators. And so,
You hit
I
on
mean,
something there, Caitlin, that we see a lot, which is this is my truth. I saw my cousin's child. Don't that we hear a lot about like a mom's instinct. I saw it with my own two eyes. That seems to be communicated,
Mm-hmm.
and it's running up against public health, which is like, no, statistically speaking, we ran studies on this, and that can't be right, and maybe that's the exception, but we did a study and we had 1,000
Mm-hmm.
people and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what's going to win? Like, what's
yeah, but you guys, like, I feel like just time out for a second. Like, how are you going to form all these opinions without these like rigorous studies? I mean, it's like you have this like
no,
you
no,
go
no.
to
It's not take down
IKEA,
the
you go to
studies, do the
IKEA,
studies. It's how do you communicate the study? You can't just
right?
say,
Okay,
we did a
wait. He was
study.
about to say something
Yeah.
about IKEA. I
Yeah.
love IKEA. Go,
You
Mark.
go to IKEA, right? You got this like giant shelf that you saw and you want to put it together, and you get this stupid manual. It's like so hard to put together. That's a scientific paper, right? But then you're like, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to go to YouTube and I'm going to like Google, and then there's some dude like putting it together, and then you just like copy that dude and pause and pause and pause.
And guess what? It works just as well.
It works just as well. But how did that dude get the information? He read it. Somebody had to read it.
Here's the thing, Mark. I want you guys to be more than just the writers of fucking furniture manuals, okay? Like, let's be bigger.
I don't know if it was a good analogy, but
No. It's a decent analogy, but sometimes I think that this is how science views itself. It is our job to give you the facts. It is our job to tell you when you're wrong about the facts. And what Maha is doing is saying, we want to add value to your lives. We may not always get our facts right, and we all know here. And
okay,
we
that's
all
a
have
big
our-
deal.
right?
That's a big deal.
All I'm saying is, and I don't know that the scientific establishment, whatever that is, wherever y'all establish, whatever
Right here.
academy, whatever building, I don't know that like it's your job to add value to people's lives is actually an agreed upon idea. Jess, what do you think about that?
Sorry, you see me, I'm like dying to, because
I'm
there's so many
dying.
things here. It's, you know what it is? Maha listens, science speaks. Like Maha is listening. Tom, I think it was you who you were just saying how, people are bringing their stories and they're telling their experiences, and Maha, they lift each other up. They're listening, and we dismiss. Oh, that's just an anecdote. I myself, I cringe when I look back at some of the content I put out through Unbiased Science, which is like, your anecdote is not evidence. How dismissive, how rude. I mean, no wonder people aren't listening to us. Caitlin, I think you said it. We come across as ivory tower and paternalistic and judgmental. And, and this is not, when I say this, people get mad at me because it feels like I'm, ragging on science and science communicators. But there is a level of judgment. And I think that's screwing us. It's making us less effective, right? And so I think that's why we've lost the battle with Maha. I think there's a way to give information without being so dismissive, without dismissing anyone who like questions vaccines as, oh, you're just an anti-vaxxer, you're an idiot, you're a anti-science skeptic or whatever. No, I think people have questions because they're inundated with mixed signals, on social media. So no wonder they have questions.
I mean, you guys
love
are
it.
like on the cusp of, this new way of communicating. I mean, it seems like you have all the ingredients here. Like you're acknowledging your weaknesses. You're seeing this is where we have areas of improvement. But just like take a step back here for a second. I just want to know about you guys. And when you wake up in the morning, how confident are you that you're able to do your job? Like, what worries you? Like, you guys are public health, like, experts in communication. Caitlin, I know you said you didn't take a class in communication. I find that extremely hard to believe. Like, you have an MPH. Like, the entire premise of public health is, communicating science and taking science to policy. Like, you guys are nodding no. Like, I have it wrong. That's not what public health is.
No.
What's public health?
It's it's understanding the patterns of disease and what causes things. It's never been how do you translate that to the United States? How do you translate that to the world to show that it's important for them and how to empower them? And I think that's the challenge. I mean, and I'm going to move us to solutions if that's okay. But like, I think if we go back to this IKEA manual thing, like, I think one of the solutions is figuring out how can we translate that manual for more YouTubers to feel empowered to empower their networks, or others. And that need is still not seen in the public health world. And, I think people are just like, print more manuals. And it's just like, that is just not.
Katelyn, can I love that so much. I think that's one of the things that inspired me to be on this podcast, is that I can put out as many scientific papers as I want, but there's that missing component, that distillation to the public. And we don't have an infrastructure to support people, to train people on how to start a Substack for public health, on how to start a podcast. Both of you did this with no manual, and now you have the expertise to provide that. So is there a hunger from institutions to support that type of work? Where do you see that coming from? Where's the solution? How do we make that happen?
I wish you could see the faces of our guests right now. Jess, what do you think about that? Is there support?
No, there's no support. We're dying for support. We're begging for support. Katelyn mentioned funding. Where are we getting funding? We've lost, historically, public health has been very government aligned, right? We all know where we stand with federal government right now. So where are we turning? We're all begging, philanthropy for dollars. They're getting squeezed. Where do we get our support? Every dollar that we accept is so scrutinized. Whereas then you have like wellness people who are making millions of dollars doing doing social media full time because they're not held to the same standard that we are. And you throw in the fact that we are naturally givers, right? We want, in public health, we want to help people. So I think a lot of people know, like, we're willing to do this. We're going to do this. So why do they have to pay us, right? We're going to do it anyway. And so it's like we cannot get support. This is so unsustainable. And it is such a labor intensive. It's a science, it's an art, it's a skill. I would argue that not everyone can or should be doing it. And it's just, there's no recognition of the value that we're bringing here. Katelyn?
Yeah, I don't know, guys. We needed this during the Biden administration. We needed this before. We've needed this for the past 20 years. And one thing that, and I've been, I don't know, screaming this from a rooftop for a very long time. And what I discovered was that it wasn't coming. And so I had to bootstrap this need forward. Right now is a really interesting time. And I get really frustrated because, there's a lot of philanthropy that does want to help. I think everyone's just very paralyzed on what to do. I think everyone recognizes that there's a problem, but don't agree on the solution, or don't want to take risks around, the first step forward. Right now, we're basically building a plane as we fly it right now, and that takes inherent risk. It also is not really sexy for funders, right? Like, to build an infrastructure seems super boring and will take a long time. But truly, I think what is needed, I think some are slowly getting there, but the hurricane's already here, and now people are running with their heads cut off, or what is it? People are running around with chickens with their heads cut off, and worried that they didn't board their windows while we've been screaming that a hurricane was coming. And so, I think we can all do, and so we find ourselves in
What's the hurricane right now?
Confusion, questions, concerns, fears, that we have always in public health, I don't know always, but have labeled as mis and disinformation, without recognizing that that is the tip of the iceberg, and it's not really what is driving a lot of these rumors online.
So is the problem now, it's not the outbreak, it's not the infectious agent, it's not the virus, it's like us, it's like a self-created disaster. We can't communicate and we don't know how to reach people, and we're like, is that public health problem number one?
Yeah, it is. It's actually the number one what is that world someone's number one concern in the world.
Yeah, like what's the
I
biggest threat
think
to
that
national security? Or
right, but let's take that apart for a sec, right? Because it truly is a challenge that like if we in public health do not figure out how to communicate why MMR vaccine is really important and it can't be separated out and why we have the timing we have, more and more people will not get the vaccine. And then we're going to get more and more outbreaks and more kids dying. And that is a public health concern. So all of these are connected. And that connection, I think, is broadly the solution to that connection is broadly not agreed upon.
I see a hurricane that's hitting Florida right now, which is the state has said they want to end requirements for public school vaccination. And if that starts to spread to other states, you start to undo this system that, effectively kept America vaccinated and safe. You can debate sort of, should there be exceptions and, for religious beliefs or, those kinds of things. But I saw Benny Johnson, who's a podcaster, say that parents should have the final say over kids' health, not the government. Parental choice is the cornerstone of free societies. Parents decide what children eat, what schools they attend, what movies they watch, and they should decide what goes into their bodies. Mandates strip parents of that responsibility. Can you guys see a way in which vaccine requirements can withhold or can hold the line if the conversation suddenly is you are stripping away parents' rights to control what goes into their children's bodies? Like, is this system going to come down because of the way it's being framed now?
Oh my God, I have so many thoughts about this. Jess, I feel like I'm talking too much, but feel free to jump in. But I think that there's no doubt we're moving towards a more individualized society and away from collective good. And there's a balance there, right? And I'm not here to say which one's more important or which one should supersede, but there are going to be consequences to that. So infectious diseases violate the assumption of independence, right? Like what you do as a parent directly impacts what I have to experience as a parent. If there's a measles outbreak at a daycare, my kid will have to quarantine for 3 weeks. They're going to have to miss 3 weeks worth of school. And so, there's this team effort that is required. And what makes me really quite sad of this moment is the lack of recognition that we are all on the same team as well. To keep our kids in school and healthy. And no, I think that we're going to move more and more towards an individualized society, and we're going to see more and more outbreaks, and then the pendulum's going to swing the other way. And I think that's the most exhausting thing about all of this too. Jess, you want to?
And it's just one thing on this because it's important. It's happening right now. The CDC just released, the press release for the new vaccination schedule, and I'm going to read 2 sentences from it. It says that they're going to apply individual-based decision-making to the COVID-19 vaccination. And then like the headline or like the buzzword out of it is informed consent is back. And that was just released now while we're taping. But anyway, Jess, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that is important. Informed consent, but who's doing the informing? And are the parents making these decisions receiving good information, right? So that's where Katelyn and I and other science communicators are trying, because I get that mama bear instinct. I understand that mandates in a place like the United States often backfire, right? People will often, when we talk about mandates, I'll talk about places like Sweden, Denmark, and I'm sorry if I'm botching this, but they're like, well, they didn't have mandates, during COVID. They didn't mandate whatever it was, the vaccine or masks. I don't remember. And it's like, yeah, but in those places, the culture is one of this, collective good. So they don't need the mandate to have people sort of, comply with the public health guidance. It's different here in the US. And I agree with Katelyn that unfortunately we're going to see the consequences of that. And there are a lot of people who are like, the FAFO, the F around and find out, like people are just going to learn the hard way. I struggle a lot with that. I know I don't want to speak for Katelyn, but I know Katelyn's heart. It's like the people who are finding out are kids who are going to get measles and SSPE and all, these encephalitis and these immune amnesia. Like, there are these terrible consequences. But you're right. I think it is unfortunately going to take catastrophe to swing the pendulum the other way.
Well, let me jump in here for a second, because so here's my take on the hurricane. So I think the hurricane is mistrust. I think the hurricane that we are up against right now is not so much like any individual component, but it's the wider frame that's hit every single industry field right now, which is a mistrust for what the status quo in that whatever field was, right? And I guess the one thing that I'm wondering is, Jess just talked about like the fuck around and find out, and kids will like be really negatively impacted, and that's maybe what'll cause change or whatever. But I think about the fact that like, if public health and getting vaccinated is the only time we're really discussing collective good as a society, is that actually the country being like, well, great, the only time we're coming together is like to fucking get a jab? Like, hear me out for a second. Here's what I mean when I say that. I just mean that one of the things we try to do on the show is to build a community. Is to actually build a community so that when and if things happen, we like have each other to call. There's like trusted people that we've created a network out of, whether it's MAHA, MAGA, public health, science, like all of us are part of this community. We're now part of group text. We've built a little family here so that when things happen, we can text each other. You know what I mean? And we can call each other. And I almost feel like that's what's missing right now from public health. There is no actual relationship with the public. And the only time it seems like there is a relationship with the public is like, we need you to get vaccinated or else your kids are going to die. We need you to do this thing or else something really fucking bad's going to happen. And one of the things that I see MAHA doing is they're constantly creating communities out of every single thing they care about, whether it's nutrition, whether it's school lunch, whether it's let's have late school start time, let's have, this little widget that I want to get made. I'm going to start a grassroots mom Facebook group and we're all going to care about that thing. What is that for public health, right? Because right now, it often seems like it is still just an institutional place that is most comfortable with giving recommendations, because that's really all that people have asked from it for all of these years. I don't fully know if what I'm saying I even agree with fully, but I'm just like trying to audition this idea that like, do we need to go back to the roots of like creating a community so that people view value in public health for things beyond what are really still very institutional decisions, even if they do save lives? Jess, what do you think about that? Do you totally disagree?
No, I don't totally disagree. Katelyn said earlier, humans trust humans, right? And I think that really vibes with what you're saying right now. And before we hit record, Mark, I think you said, so Mark follows my personal page, and I post the human side of Jess Steier, right? Where my daughter was putting on my makeup. I'll post videos dancing in the kitchen with my husband. And it's so interesting that personal page, I have so much more of a sense of community. Like, I'm interacting so much more with my followers there. And it's like a 0.1% of the following I have it Unbiased. But there's this weird thing, and I don't know, this is taking us off track, but like on Unbiased, sometimes when I veer away from science, I get the shut up science robot, only talk to me about science things, I don't want to hear anything else. And then there's also the very real, we get threats, and, it's scary to show a little bit more of that human side of ourselves and our families and let people in, because that's often used against us. And I know Katelyn and I have both received terrible threats and things. So it's this weird, I don't know. It's like, which audience are we trying to reach? I know I could do a lot more to reach moms and foster that sense of, I'm a mom too, I get it. And I'm here doing the things that you're doing and getting my kid ready for school. But then I get like self-conscious, and I think people maybe don't want to know that side of me. I don't know. Okay. I don't know how you feel.
I think they
about
do.
it.
I think they do. And I think it helps. I mean, almost like this is just some sort of giant misunderstanding. Like, this is a giant misunderstanding that we're having. We all want the same thing. Like, and maybe it's like MAHA is so focused on, individual choice. We talked about informed consent, just let me, like what Tom was saying, like, let me decide what I'm going to do with my body. And then the public health side is, and I'm stating the obvious here, is like looking at like populations and, you know, all of that stuff. And instead of like trying to occupy the same lane, like let them be, like let the Maha people, let the medical freedom movement people, let them do their thing. And then you over here, the public health side, you're also just raising your flags, sending out your signals, and you do your own thing. Like, why do we feel like there's a battle? Like, can it be both?
Yes. I think this is where I'm really the most frustrated around public health over the past 8 months, is that we look like and are defending the status quo rather than providing an alternative path to invite people to come along with, and showing why we're valuable rather than screaming it from the rooftops. And I think that this is going to take a while. I don't think that this is going to be solved tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, and what you said, Mark, is the reality of what we're all living in is that I have to make an individual decision with my kids, as well as really care about my neighbors and my family. And both of those can coexist at the same time. I think the thing that I'm most concerned about is when we don't start listening to each other. And that's where we can just get into these echo chambers without really co-developing a future forward.
I mean, Katelyn, I think that echo chamber point really needs to be underscored because it's almost like even if you guys got fantastic messaging and we're really finding ways to reach people, part of it is that to really pierce the media ecosystem right now, it's a volume issue. It's sort of trying to get into other people's, like their coded tribes are different than your coded tribe. So how do you get the algorithm to show them your coded tribe? It's so hard. So I want to just like in kind of as we're thinking about wrapping, because I could talk to you guys all day fully. Tell me again, tell our audience just really specifically, like, what do you need? Where is it that people like you who are some of the more effective science communicators out there, and even you feel like you're struggling in this moment, what do you need right now? Jess, let's start with you.
Help me, I'm poor. Katelyn's heard me say that a lot. Sorry, Maggie, just
say it,
covered
girl.
her face.
Say it.
I mean, for me specifically, it's funding. It's, I have to do all these other things on, I'm a trained data scientist, evaluation scientist, and I'm doing all these other things when right now my passion is science communication and I want to get out there and I want to say all the things, but I can't pay a team to help me and support me. So I don't have an easy answer. I don't know who that knight in shining armor is for us, but for me, it's the funding. So yeah, I'll pause there and hear what Katelyn has to say.
And listen, that's not a small thing. And at some point, we should just talk about that in and of itself and what the philanthropic community and movement has meant to science comms and whether or not there's enough support there. But Katelyn, what do you need in this moment?
Funding, not as much as what Jess needs. I mean, I've figured out some sort of self-sustainable model, but I am also very rare in this space. But beyond that, we need sustainable models. I'm very concerned about this idea of a cycle of panic and neglect, and that we're getting a whole lot of panic right now. And in 3 years, all of that's going to go away to the next thing people are panicking about. And we really have to understand that new infrastructure needs to be made. And, like I said, we needed this during the last administration too. I think the other thing I would say is a culture of change. I think that we in public health really need to recognize we need to do stuff differently. That is still, I mean, culture takes such a long time to change too. I will say the fourth thing, and this is where a lot of my heart is that we do need a radical transformation and rethinking of our systems grounded in principles, really to achieve this vision of the future that we all deserve. I have yet to see some sort of vision of grounded in all of the principles we all care about, but is also born out of imagination and hope at the bottom, like just executing for just healthier America. Like I think that there's no doubt that we could all be healthy and our systems don't respond to that. And so
Yeah.
I am really craving a vision of what we as Americans view as the ultimate thing that we're working towards, and I have yet to see that.
Actually, I really admire what you guys are doing, Brenda, here, because I think that's the other big thing. We have to, like, science, we're very, like, self-contained. And right now, Katelyn and I, we have talked about this. Like, I know content that I could put out on my Instagram right now that would go viral. I would probably triple my audience, and it would be the hyper polarizing, very political statement that the science community would rah, rah, rah. But then I would totally alienate the people that I feel strongly that I really want to reach. So there has to be more partnerships. Like, yes, I'm a public health scientist, but I want to go on non-science podcasts. I want, we have to break out of this shell and lean into our humanity more. And so I think it's amazing what you're doing, honestly. And I would love, like, I approach random, like, I'll slide into DMs, like other like celebs and stuff. And it's like, help, like, we don't just have to talk about science, like, just help us break out of this echo chamber. Just help us, and
Well,
I don't know
the
how
one
to do
thing
that.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. There is one thing that I would say that has helped us on this show reach people. It's that we also on the show mistrust the status quo in certain ways. And when you do, say it. Like, say it openly, loudly, clearly, with facts.
Yeah.
Because we are in a moment right now when a lot of people mistrust the status quo, and we can argue about where it's warranted, where it's not. But if you are seen as someone who, like, is tweeting out, like, what the AMA and AAP and APHA is saying about Kennedy resigning, and, like, that's like the main way that you're using your platforms. And I'm not saying the two of you, but I'm seeing this a lot. It's like not taking into account that even those, or like the AMA has not necessarily been super great in its history in the way that it's, like, negotiated rates for doctors, and how that hasn't always helped, like, the regular person at home try to afford their care. Or that, like, there's been, we certainly know what how complicated of a relationship Americans have with pharmaceutical companies in this country. It doesn't mean that we should be calling everybody pharma shills, but we've had Maha people on the show say that they don't think everybody should be called pharma shills. What are ways in which, we can communicate to the public that we also see problems with the establishment and the status quo?
Yeah.
And I think that is a way to build trust. I'm just saying it.
And bolting onto that, just when you see Maha onto something that you agree with, say it. Don't go underground and say, well, we can't give them any credit because we think, these parts of them are so dangerous. We can't support the nutrition or the food dyes or any of these other things that I imagine many people in public health have been fighting for years and years and years. They have such enthusiasm. They are on a mission to make America healthy. And for them, it's infectious, really, the enthusiasm. They believe in the cause and they are running with it. And I think that's what public health is missing right now. Like you said, you could tweet out something. If it were very political, it could take off, but other things not so much. I think a lot of people just sort of associate public health now with pandemic response. And it's just not a great enthusiasm there for these really quiet, important things that public health does day in and day out.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little. So I have written about how, like, the pharma ads, like, go take those pharma ads down, man.
Yeah,
they are the most annoying. Ugh. And I wrote about it and it completely went flat. So, like, I think that there's a two-way street here too, is that, like, when public health puts out their neck, it would be really nice for Maha to be like, holy shit, look at this public health person really putting out their neck and really fighting for this thing that we all agree on. And I think this goes back to, like, the echo chambers and blah, 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 right? And we're all in our own tribes and we need to, and I agree. We need to put out olive branches and that sort of thing. And so I've been trying to do that, like the Charlie.
Maha's missing the boat because you guys know systems. You know how to make the changes.
Well, here's the thing. I think
missing that.
I think you've hit on something really important because the message of prescription drug ads being removed from television is a really popular one that blows up on Maha, but it didn't blow up on your feed, right? And the reason it didn't blow up on your feed is because of the media algorithm and the media echo chamber. And maybe your audience, maybe it's tilted towards one way a little bit more than another. I have no idea. But the point is that you're absolutely right, Katelyn. And in order for that to happen, like, part of the reason I think for us, there have been some of those inroads we've been building, and I would say that you have too. I don't know that you're exactly who we're talking about in this case, but I think in a lot of other instances, that message may not be going through because, like, infrastructurally, the media is not allowing it to go through. It doesn't mean we should stop saying it.
Correct.
And it doesn't, because it will go through at some point if enough of these, somebody called it algorithmic nodes. And I really love that expression, that we have to build these algorithmic nodes so that people can travel between echo chambers. And so that even if your entire audience doesn't become one that is now available to another audience, that there's information that can travel on these like little exit ramps, right? And that's what we're trying to build on this show, is we are trying to build algorithmic nodes where we're learning from other communities, maybe they're learning from us, and we're almost trying to build a separate platform altogether that is like out of this, like, you're left coded, you're right coded. So we're trying to be like, no, we're orange or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what color we are, you know? And it's so fucking hard. And I don't even know if we're doing it, but like, that's the intent. Is like, the algorithm to me is our biggest challenge, if I'm being honest with you. It really is. And I'm in like, fight the algorithm. That's if I had a sign right now walking around New York, I'd be like, fight the fucking algorithm.
You know, in terms of, just lest we forget that we have two dynamic public health speakers right here with us. I think even though we know that we don't know what public health is, like, I'm leaving this podcast maybe like knowing less what public health is supposed to be doing, but I want to know what the two of you are doing this week. Like, what are you working on right now? Because I think if people hear that, they will see, like, this is public health working for me. Like, Katelyn or Jess, who I don't know who wants to go first. Like, what are you working on? Like, what are you putting out this week? Like, what are you solving? How are you helping us?
You want me to go first, Katelyn? Okay, a couple of things I'm doing. I'm reading every single one of the studies. Yes, I'm still focused on the Tylenol autism thing because I'm getting a zillion questions about it. So I'm reading every single one of the studies that were in that big meta-analysis that everyone is talking about, right? How 27 of the studies showed some sort of a positive association. I am actually reading them because I don't want to just, come out with a statement that isn't actually nuanced and not giving the attention that it deserves. And then I'm also doing some other stuff and sorry, I'll try to keep this super brief, but working with a university medical system to evaluate a maternal and child mental health program to see, the impact that that's having on the population that they serve, to try to get payers in the state on board with this program. That's a totally other, like, non-science communication thing that public health does. I hope that wasn't too boring and in the weeds, but
interesting.
Yeah. Katelyn?
Yeah, I was trying to think of what I'm doing this week. I'm actually going to an ivory tower tomorrow to rail on how they need to change things. So that'll be always interesting. And
she's gonna have a rope ladder to climb up.
I have really dived head into needing to rebuild systems, and with an eye towards scientific communication. Last week, we had a really fun convening of mom influencers that are not in science whatsoever, but to try to figure out what they need and what their communities need and how we can be a service to them. And so building out that community. And then, like I always just try to do is bring people along for the ride on what's happening with public health. Try to answer questions, and there's a lot going on and a lot of questions around the shutdown that we're currently at. And like, what does that shutdown, how does that impact people's health on the ground, and what are they going to feel and how and why is I need to press send once we get off of this recording and send that out. But I don't know, a whole lot of listening and trying to meet people where they're at.
Well, listen, Jess Steier, Katelyn Jetelina, the reason we had you on the show was because we knew we could have a totally no-holds-barred conversation. This was wild. I loved it. And we really love what you do. The truth is we're all in a new landscape together. The whole country is, quite frankly. I think we're experiencing a really major transformation, and none of this stuff happens overnight. And I don't think anyone can really sit here being like, they're doing it right and they're doing it wrong. And but I will say that I think it's important to communicate, like, if there's help that's needed and resources needed. And, you know, I do sort of firmly hope that, like, I think that this is generational work, quite frankly. I don't think that this is something that will take a year or two. I think that we're in a moment now where every person involved in communications is sort of relearning how to do it, you know? So anyway, I just want to thank the two of you so much. Please check out the Unbiased Substack and Your Local Epidemiologist. We'll put it in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So that is our podcast for this week. I am Brenda Adhikari. She is Maggie Bartlett. He is Dr. Mark. He is Tom Johnson. Please send questions, comments to questions@whyshoulditrustyou.net. Check us out on Substack, YouTube,
TikTok.
No, we're not there.
Oh,
I don't know
not
how
there.
to do TikTok.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know where the
One of us is.
Instagram. I think we're on Instagram. We're getting there. See, we need help. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.